Hello and welcome to MagicMingle. Here on our channel, we bring classic stories to life in modern English to help you improve your language skills. Whether you're learning English or simply love timeless literature, you're in the perfect place. Today, we're diving into Anton Chekhov's story, The Husband. This intriguing tale centers on Shalikov, a bitter and controlling tax collector, and his wife Anna. At a ball hosted for visiting officers, Anna is swept up in the excitement, dancing and laughing, while her husband watches from a distance. Consumed by jealousy and resentment, Shalikov insists that they leave early, shattering Anna's joy. This story explores themes of insecurity, possessiveness, and the impact of jealousy on relationships, offering a glimpse into how one person's negativity can dampen another's happiness. Here's a quick summary of the story. Shalikov, resentful of his wife's happiness as she dances with officers, demands that she leave the ball with him. Reluctantly, she agrees, and they walk home in silence, her excitement replaced by sadness. Through Shalikov's actions, Chekhov highlights the way jealousy and possessiveness can damage relationships and reveals the emotional toll of living with a partner who cannot share in another's joy. In this retelling, we've updated the language to make it easier to follow while preserving Chekhov's original message. Follow along as we explore this powerful story, and let it help you practice your English while reflecting on important life lessons. The N Cavalry Regiment had stopped in the small town of K for the night during its maneuvers. The visit of officers always brought excitement to provincial towns. Shopkeepers eagerly anticipated selling their dusty sausages and canned sardines that had been sitting on shelves for years. Inns and restaurants stayed open all night, ready for business. The town's military commandant, his secretary, and the local garrison pulled out their best uniforms. Police scurried back and forth, and the women of the town were beyond excited. When the ladies of K heard the regiment was approaching, they dropped whatever they were doing and ran into the streets. Some left pots of jam boiling on the stove, and others ran out without fixing their hair or clothes. With eager expressions, they gathered to watch the soldiers march in, listening breathlessly to the military band. To see their faces, you might think they were listening to a heavenly choir instead of brass instruments. "The regiment!" they cried, thrilled. "The regiment is here!" What did this brief visit mean to them? These officers would be gone by dawn, but somehow, the town felt different with them there. As the officers gathered in the square to discuss sleeping arrangements, the women crowded into the local magistrate's house to talk about the regiment. They somehow already knew everything about the officers. The colonel was married but separated, the senior officer's wife had lost multiple children, the adjutant was madly in love with a countess and had once tried to take his own life. They had only caught a quick look at the officers' backs, but had already judged that there wasn't a particularly handsome man among them. After sharing all this gossip, they insisted that the military commandant and the club committee organize a dance. Their wishes were granted. At 9 that evening, the band was playing outside the club, and inside, the officers were dancing with the women of Cave. The women were ecstatic, barely able to contain their happiness as they danced and mingled with their new partners, completely forgetting their usual company. Meanwhile, their husbands and fathers, bank clerks, secretaries, inspectors, and other local officials, stood around the refreshment table in the entry hall, feeling left out. These civilian men knew they were no match for the officers. They avoided the ballroom entirely, choosing to observe their wives and daughters from a distance as they danced with the charming visitors. Among the men was Shalikov, the local tax collector. He was a bitter, narrow-minded man, with a round, cropped head and thick lips. There had been a time when he'd read progressive literature and sung student songs, but now he described himself simply as a tax collector. Leaning against the doorframe, he watched his wife, Anna Pavlovna, a small brunette in her 30s with a long nose and a pointed chin. Dressed in a tight corset with her face powdered, Anna danced tirelessly, her feet moving in perfect rhythm. She seemed transported, as though her spirit was elsewhere. It was clear she was recalling a time from her youth when she had danced at her girls' school, dreaming of a life filled with luxury and excitement, never doubting she would marry a prince, or at the very least, a baron. Shalikov watched with a scowl. His expression was not one of jealousy but rather resentment. He was irritated for several reasons. For one, the dancing took up the entire hall, leaving him nowhere to play cards. Second, he despised brass instruments and found their sound unbearable. And lastly, he felt the officers treated the local men, like himself, with too much indifference. But more than anything, what annoyed him was the expression of happiness on his wife's face. "It makes me sick to look at her," he muttered. "Almost 40, and never much to look at, and here she is all powdered up and acting like she's still young. Frizzing her hair and parading around like a girl." Anna Pavlovna was so absorbed in the dancing that she didn't once glance at her husband. "Of course she's ignoring me," Shalikov sneered. "To her, we're just country bumpkins, while she's the belle of the ball. She probably thinks the officers would love to flirt with her if she gave them the chance." During the mazurka, Shalikov's face twisted with annoyance. His wife was dancing with a tall officer with dark hair and sharp features. He danced with serious concentration, while Anna, pale and caught up in the music, looked as if she were floating. She seemed far removed from the provincial dance hall. Shalikov couldn't take it any longer. He wanted to burst her bubble, to remind her that her life was not as glamorous as she seemed to think at that moment. "Just wait. I'll show you," he muttered. "You're no young girl anymore." A wave of petty jealousy and resentment washed over him. As soon as the mazurka ended, he walked into the hall and approached his wife. She was seated with her dance partner, fanning herself and chatting animatedly about how she used to dance in Petersburg. "Anna," he croaked, "it's time to go home." Anna Pavlovna started, seeming to remember she had a husband. She blushed slightly, embarrassed at the thought of how plain and ordinary her husband looked, especially next to the handsome officers. "Why? It's still early," she replied. "I want you home with me." "Now," he said with a firm, almost mean expression. "Did something happen?" she asked, sounding anxious. "No, nothing happened. But I want you home right away." That's all there is to it. She cast a quick glance at her partner, who was watching with mild curiosity, and felt a pang of shame. She stood up and moved a little aside with her husband. "What's gotten into you?" she whispered. "Why do we have to go? It's not even 11 yet. I said I want to leave." "Let's go," he repeated stubbornly. "Don't be ridiculous. If you want to go, go by yourself." "Fine. But if you stay, I'll make a scene," he threatened. As her expression shifted from joy to frustration, Shalikov felt a twisted satisfaction. Her glow had faded, and she looked ashamed and uneasy. "Why do you want me home so badly?" she asked. "I don't need you there. I just want you home. That's all." Anna Pavlovna tried pleading, reasoning, even bargaining for a few more minutes. She kept her voice low, aware of the people around her, but Shalikov remained immovable. "Stay if you want," he said with an icy tone, "but I'll cause a scene if you do." Reluctantly, Anna Pavlovna gave in. She looked pale and tired as she walked out to the entryway to get her things. Her friends called out in surprise. "You're leaving already? Anna, are you okay?" "She has a headache," Shalikov answered for her. The walk home was silent. Shalikov trailed behind his wife, watching her small, dejected figure as they walked. He recalled the look of happiness she'd worn earlier, which had so irritated him, and felt an odd sense of triumph now that it was gone. But he also felt strangely empty, as though something was still missing. He wished he could go back to the club and spread his discontent around, so everyone else would feel as dreary as he did, so they would all know how grim life could be. Anna Pavlovna, meanwhile, struggled to keep pace. Her mind was still filled with the music, the lights, and the energy of the dance. She wondered why her life had turned out like this. She felt miserable, insulted, and angry, especially hearing her husband's heavy footsteps behind her. She tried to think of something sharp and cutting to say, but she knew that words would not affect Shalikov. Her bitterest insults would only fall on deaf ears. Her husband was immune to words. Meanwhile, the music continued to echo through the night, filling the darkness with melodies that were still full of life and joy, even though she was no longer there to enjoy them.
Thank you for listening. Like, subscribe, and share our channel Magic Mingle with your friends to enjoy more magical stories.